Hello, everybody. My name is Jose Frago, and with the help of my classmates, Josue Jean, Kevin Bolognese, and Parker Dowling, we will be presenting you guys today Group 16 presentation on the importance of trade and specialization and comparative advantage between Mexico and the United States. To begin the presentation, let's first take a look at the two countries we're comparing at hand. First off, Mexico. It is the 11th largest country in the world. It is located in North America and it has United States in its northern border and Guatemala and Belize on its southern borders. Its official language is Spanish and its population is around 129 million. And the main religion is Catholicism and Christianity. Next up is the United States. It is also located in North America, with Canada in its northern border and Mexico in its southern border. Its capital is Washington, D.C. Its official language is English. There are multiple religions practiced throughout the whole nation with different groups of people, ethnicities, and its population is currently sitting at about 328.2 million.
I'm Joshua. Why Mexico and the United States trade? They trade to gain foreign investment, raise employment level, gain comparative advantage, as well as economic growth. So, international trade plays a significant role in raising countries' economic growth. It is also an important determinant in raising living standard, providing employment, as well as enabling consumers to enjoy a greater variety of goods. Throughout our research, we have found that Mexico and the United States share some common economic interests related to trade investment. They also share a 2,000 miles border and have extensive interconnection to the Gulf of Mexico. They also have some link to immigration, tourism, environmental standard, as well as cultural relationship. After providing those reasons why they have to trade, now we're gonna look at the economic relationship between the two countries. Economic relations. Based on our research, we found there's a strong cultural and economic ties that connect the two countries. Mexico is actually the US top trading partner, while the United States is by far Mexico the largest trading partner. In 2019, Mexico surpassed China as the US top trading partner with $614.5 billion in total trades. Adding to that, the flow of intermediate inputs produced in the United States export to Mexico and return in the US as finished goods has greatly increased the importance of the United States and Mexico economic relationship. So the US manufacturing industry, including electronic appliance and machinery, all rely on the assistance of Mexico manufacturers. With that, we can say there's a strong economic relationship between the two countries. And that gonna bring us to the trade agreement. Trade agreement. In order to facilitate trade, continue to be agree on certain things. So one of the most important trade agreement between the United States and Mexico was NAFTA. NAFTA stands for North American Free Trade Agreement. It was created by three nations, Canada, United States, and Mexico. For this project, we're gonna concentrate more on United States and Mexico. So NAFTA basically eliminates most tariff on good trading between the United States and Mexico, as well as protecting intellectual property rights. So, July 1st, NAFTA was being replaced by USMCA. USMCA actually stands for United States, Mexico, and Canada Agreement. This new agreement will expire in 16 years if it's not renewed. So, what is the goal of USMCA? The goal of USMCA includes some important change on cars, new policy on labor and environmental standard, intellectual property protection, and some digital trade protection. After look at this two trade agreement between Mexico and the United States, now we're gonna look at some key economic indicator between those two countries related to this trade agreement.
Next up, let's take a look at some key economic indicators for both the US and Mexico. So, to begin with, the nominal GDP, we can see that Mexico's is much more than the United States. And as a refresher, let's remind you that nominal GDP is an assessment of the economic production in an economy, which includes the calculation of both the current prices of goods and services. Next up, the PPP basis is basically stands for purchasing power parity, which is an adjustment to convert nominal GDP into a number more easily comparable between countries with different currencies, such as the US dollar against the Mexican peso. Then we can look at the net exports and imports, and we can see that the United States is a much bigger exporter of goods and services, and Mexico is a much greater importer of goods and services. And on to the next slide with Kevin.
Trade specialization is the tendency for a country to specialize in trading certain products that they can create cheaply for products that other countries can create cheaply. This process allows for both countries to have greater economic efficiency and allows the consumer to benefit with lower costs. An example of trade specialization that I will be using in this presentation will be shoes and refrigerators that are made in the US and Mexico. Comparative advantage is the difference in production between two parties for the same product. In this case, it is the US and Mexico. The example we will use again to highlight comparative advantage will be shoes and refrigerators. The US can produce about 4,500 shoes and 26,000 refrigerators. Mexico can produce 800 shoes and 3,500 refrigerators in the same period of time. The US makes around a fifth of a shoe for each refrigerator it can produce. And Mexico makes almost 2 shoes for each refrigerator they can produce. This means that the US has a comparative advantage in making refrigerators and should export refrigerators, and Mexico has an advantage in making shoes, so they should export shoes. Trade between two nations allows for both nations to increase their production possibility by importing what is hard for them to produce and export what is easy for them to produce. Back to the examples of shoes and refrigerators. Trade allows for the US to import shoes and Mexico to export shoes. This also allows for the US to export refrigerators and Mexico to import refrigerators. Trade between Mexico and the US has been increasing every year, with the US exports lower than US imports. The effects of trade on a country's economy can have many factors, which can be both good and bad. The good of having free trade is that it can bring prices down by increasing supply, which in turn increases production levels of a country. A downside to international trade is that it can affect the economy in a negative way. If there is an excess of imports compared to exports, it can lead to a trade deficit. Trade barriers are put in place to attempt to limit trade so it doesn't become detrimental to the economy, but it can still reap the benefits gained by trading in moderation.
Hello, my name is Parker Dowling, and I will be presenting 3 slides for you today. The first is terms of trade regarding the difference between the United States and Mexico. Terms of trade corresponds to the ratio of price of exportable goods to the price of importable goods. Based on our research, we can see that Mexico and the United States dramatically dropped during the second quarter of 2020. Terms of trade in Mexico averaged 62.49 points from 1970 until 2020, reaching an all-time high of 106.34 points in January of 1981 and a record low of 42.38 points in April of 2020. Terms of trade in the United States is expected to be 98.72 points by the end of this quarter, according to the Trading Economics Global Macro Models and analyst expectations. Terms of trade in the United States averaged 115.28 points from 1967 until 2020, reaching an all-time high of 172.45 points in the second quarter of 1968 and a record low of 94.05 points in the third quarter of 2008. Next, I'll be discussing the effects of tariffs and quotas on imported goods from Mexico. Tariffs are simply taxes put on imported goods, and historical evidence shows that tariffs raise prices and reduce available quantities of goods and services for U.S. businesses and consumers. This results in lower income, reduced employment, and lower economic output. Our research shows that the United States has been trending downward for almost 60 years when it comes to imposing tariffs on imported goods. Quotas, on the other hand, restrict the quantity of imports a country receives in a certain period. This is because a country wants to regulate how much they import versus how much they produce. In May of 2019, President Trump announced that the United States was lifting tariffs on steel and aluminum on Canada and Mexico. Lifting these tariffs on Mexico and Canada reduces tariff revenue by approximately $2.6 billion. In May of 2019, the U.S. threatened a 5% tariff beginning on June 10th of $346.5 billion on imports from Mexico until illegal immigration across the southern border stops. It would rise to 10% on July 1st, 15% on August 1st, 20% on September 1st, and 25% on October 1st. Finally, I will be discussing the intellectual property rights that NAFTA and the USMCA have established and revised. Intellectual property rights are time-limited rights that governments grant to inventors and artists to exclude others from using their inventions and creations without permission. President Trump and the leaders of Mexico and Canada signed the USMCA, which is the trade agreement between Mexico, the United States, and Canada, and was created to replace NAFTA in July of 2020. Based on our research, the United States believes increasing IPRs creates a strong comparative advantage and has been doing so since 1988. Patents protect new inventions, products, processes, technologies, and software. They must receive a minimum term of 20 years of protection. Regulatory exclusivities encourage innovation and access to medicine according to the USMCA. They make it possible to produce, test, and protect certain drugs and medicine. Trade secrets, on the other hand, are confidential formulas or lists that a company has, and the USMCA protects companies by creating fines and punishments for theft of such secrets. Trademarks protect names, marks, and symbols of a commercial company, and the USMCA allows a 10-year period in which they will protect a trademark. After that, you will have to renew it. Copyrights allow artists to protect their literary works with specific rights that allow them to reproduce, perform, and distribute their work. Most copyright terms under the USMCA are given 7 years of protection once published. Thank you.
Summary and conclusion. Throughout our research, we have seen that trade between Mexico and the United States has been increased substantially under NAFTA. We have seen as well there have been some trade disputes between the two countries over the years, and many of which have been resolved. For example, in 2009, when the US authorities imposed a tariff on Mexican goods, Mexican authorities respond with retaliatory tariff. So anytime one country trying to do something else, the other gonna do something. So because they both fight in the interest of the citizen, and they both want to get more benefit from the trade. It's a game. So international trade is a game. But even if all this, we found that Mexico and the United States have a solid foundation for international trade. Um, and if they keep working on issue like border, immigration, and improving the cultural relationship as well as health issues, they can both benefit from trade as well as comparative advantage and trade specialization. So, with that, it is important for Mexico and the United States to trade, since when they trade, that bring more benefits to their citizens and as well as improving their economy. So, with that, I want to thank you for your time and your appreciation.